Hello, and welcome everyone to the Mega Alumni Podcast. Mega is the graduate student association from the Mechanical, Aerospace, and Nuclear Engineering Department at The Ohio State University. And as a part of this podcast, we're trying to hopefully network and connect our current grad students and perhaps even undergrad students with our alumni from our department, see what career trajectories they can expect once they graduate, and please feel free to follow us on all of our social media handles. They are all listed in our YouTube description. If you are a student in our department right now, or if you're an alum, we also have a LinkedIn alumni group that you can join. And without further ado, let me introduce myself and then let's quickly get to our guests. So, my name is Nehal. I'm a grad student doing my PhD in the department. I also have a fellow mega member today, Katie. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself and then maybe we can go on to our guests?
Sure. So hi, I'm Katie. I'm also a PhD student in mechanical engineering and involved with Mega. I do biomechanics research in the neuromuscular biomechanics lab. And our guest for today, Dr. Sarah Roelker, is an alumna from the same lab that I'm in. So she is my academic older sister. So I'll go ahead and let Sarah introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Roelker. I am a proud three-time graduate of The Ohio State University. And I did do my PhD with Dr. Rob Siston in the neuromuscular biomechanics lab at Ohio State. I currently direct my own neuromuscular biomechanics lab at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where I'm an assistant professor in their kinesiology department.
So I don't remember if either one of us mentioned this, but Sarah also did a postdoc before working as an assistant professor at UMass. So my first question is about advice for finding postdocs, and I guess, do you have any advice for things to look for in a good postdoc mentor and how to make the most best experience, most out of your postdoc experience? There we go.
Yeah, I think as far as finding a postdoc, in some ways I got very lucky, but I do think it's about using your network. I had found out, and I started looking about a year prior to my expected graduation for postdoc positions, knowing that that was likely the next step in my path on my way to becoming a professor at an R1 institution, which was my goal. And so Dr. Rick Neptune, who's at the University of Texas, Austin, who I ultimately ended up doing my postdoc with, he had put out, I guess in the summer, kind of about a year prior to when I was going to graduate, that he was looking for a postdoc. The hard thing is, a lot of times with these postdoc opportunities, they're tied to grant funding or other types of funding that are of a timely nature. So a lot of times, one of the challenges I saw with finding a postdoc was while I was looking a year ahead and trying to be proactive, most people wanted someone who could start more immediately. Dr. Neptune's postdoc opportunity was tied to his position as chair at the his department. And so that gave him a little bit more flexibility than a grant might. And so he was willing to wait for me. And I ended up actually reaching out to him in person at the annual meeting of the American Society of Biomechanics back in, must have been 2016. I was encouraged by other current faculty who are friends with him, that I should go ahead and just reach out and see what happens. I would say in those cases, the worst thing anyone can tell you is, no, the timing's not good. I need someone more immediately. So I would say, as soon as you think you're ready and know that that's the next step you want to take, I would start reaching out. Let people know that you're interested and you're looking for a postdoc. I feel like, from what I've seen on the other end, is that good postdocs seem to be hard to find. And it also seems like people who are interested in postdocs are having trouble finding positions. So it's like we need to do a better job of just networking to get those people connected. But those opportunities are out there, and having your advisor let people know their friends and colleagues know that you're looking is also helpful too. For the second part of your question with regards to what do you look for in a postdoc opportunity and a postdoc mentor, I would say you really want to find someone who's going to support you in getting to your next stage of your career goals. And so Dr. Neptune was really supportive of me getting more clinical experience. That's not something like working with a clinical population. That wasn't something I had. So he was really supportive of me getting more involved in that side of the work that he does, while also leveraging my background in musculoskeletal modeling and simulation to further the research goals of his lab as well. And so I think at that stage, you're still a trainee, but you're becoming more of a peer, which is exciting and scary at the same time. And I think Dr. Neptune did a good job of helping me get out and network, supporting me, going to meet with some of his colleagues across the country. He was always willing to introduce me to like anyone at a meeting, like at ASB. He would always say, if there's someone you want to talk to, like I'm happy to make the introduction. And so that was super helpful too. And he continues to be a big advocate for me now in my faculty career. And so I think someone who's looking at your develop from the perspective of your long-term development, and that this is a long-term investment that they're making in you and not just someone to check some boxes on a grant.
Got it. Got it. Uh, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting, and kind of, as you just highlighted a little bit, that there was some opportunity of you also getting some sort of clinical experience from your postdoc that you did not have before. I was wondering if there was anything in particular that you were looking for when you were doing the postdoc, or when you were searching for the postdoc positions, like any particular type of skill sets that you thought would really help you get into the faculty role later on?
Yeah, I think I didn't have a lot of experience working, applying my research in clinical populations and thinking about, um, the different research questions, approaches, just participant recruitment, different challenges that come along with doing research in a clinical population. So being exposed to that. And another great thing about my time with Dr. Neptune is he also let me explore developing my own collaborations outside of his lab. So the opportunity came up. He does more work in stroke, which was something I was really interested in learning about, working with that population. But an opportunity came up to work with a physician in the area of Parkinson's disease. And he was supportive of me taking a little bit of time out of my week to work with her and try and develop a research protocol. And I learned a lot about working um, with clinicians and in kind of the clinical research setting from that opportunity. So I would say that was something big. I had a lot of the technical skills um, from my work that I did as a PhD student, but it was all in healthy populations. So being able to expand um, my understanding and ability to work with clinical applications and clinical populations and have applications outside of just healthy individuals was important to me when I was looking for my postdoc. I think another important thing to think about when you're looking for your postdoc is going to be the opportunity to get involved with some grant writing, because that's going to be a big skill kind of regardless of what you do. Being able to write to ask people for money to support your science, whether you're going into faculty positions or national lab positions, there's still grant writing involved. So getting the opportunity to get that experience was also really important to me.
Got it. Uh, I did have like a quick follow-up on that, on the grant aspect. So you mentioned that, grant writing experience is also something that you want to seek during your postdoc experience. I was wondering if there was also an inclination of getting the clinical side of experience, because I'm assuming that one of the grant bodies that you would probably write proposals to is NIH, and maybe they have an aspect of that clinical part that you thought you needed to be a PI, a principal investigator later on, and that kind of
Yeah,
led to you kind of kind of getting that skill set in as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to help Dr. Neptune work on some R21s for the NIH. I got used to writing that style of grants. I'd gotten a little bit of experience working with Robert Siston at Ohio State when I was a PhD student. I got to be more involved in that process as a postdoc. And there was also an opportunity to take some grant trainings that were offered on campus that Dr. Neptune supported me getting involved with. So that was also extremely helpful. So yeah, I'd say getting those opportunities and learning to write for the funding bodies and institutions that you're going to be interested in applying to for your independent funding is really important.
So I had a sort of a minor question that is more technical. So a lot of research in Rob's lab or your research is sort of more computational, or at least has some heavier computational aspect to it. So I was curious if you could talk about data sharing for computational research. So have you been able to collaborate with other biomechanics labs that have experimental data collected already to answer new research questions that you need, like simulations or computational techniques to answer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's certainly a delicate balance of spending the time on the computational simulations, which take time to develop, and also having the experimental data to work with, which takes time to collect and a lot of resources too. So I would say I learned from Dr. Neptune during my postdoc. He has some great collaborators out at the Medical University of South Carolina. And that's where they collect the stroke data. They do their analysis that they can do, kind of more medical PT type focused questions. And then on Dr. Neptune's side, he has the ability to do more of the modeling and simulation. So creating those partnerships I saw firsthand was really important. I also got the opportunity to collaborate with Dr. Paul DeVita, who's emeritus professor now at East Carolina University. And they've collected data that we've been using to answer questions that require simulation in order to answer. So I've definitely benefited from having those collaborations made. And then at my current position at UMass, I have taken on the challenging role of starting up my own motion capture lab, which has been an extremely slow process. I'm sure starting during the pandemic and having a baby along the way has not sped things up at all. And however, I have heard from many well-respected people in the field that starting up a new experimental lab takes longer than you expect every time. So since I've been trying to do that to start collect data to answer questions that I'm interested in my lab, I've been fortunate that faculty members who I collaborate with in the department have shared data with me to be able to do some answering of some of those questions, generate pilot data for NIH submissions. So yes, being able to collaborate and not have to, do all of the steps in the process yourself does help speed things up. But there's also value in collecting your own data because you're making sure you're getting exactly what you need in order to do a simulation, which is what I'm looking forward to as we start to collect data in the lab that has been in construction for 3.5 years now. So there's a lot I've learned from the process, a lot of questions I wish I would have asked beforehand from people who have more experience doing this. It's one of those cases of you don't know what you don't know. So for anyone going into that position without that experience, I would ask many people who have set up their own labs what their experiences were and what they wish they knew beforehand. Because then maybe your process won't take quite as long as mine has.
Got it. Got it. I also had like a quick follow-up question. So I like in my lab also we do a lot of computational work, and I was also wondering if there was any advice or any kind of philosophy that you're following in terms of how you publish and share your computational work going forward as well. So is there some effort that you're making so that it becomes more easily shareable, accessible, that other people can also run your computational models? Let's say if they want to compare it with their experimental results and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the field as a whole is pushing towards more of this open science and sharing of data, which I think is great. I think OpenSim has really done a lot already in that way of promoting sharing of models, sharing of data sets. For things that I have developed, GitHub has seemed to be a resource that's been easy to access. I think a lot of other modelers use it as well. I don't know how much like what I have put out there has actually been used yet. I'm hoping as I continue to develop resources, kind of working both through GitHub and then having a I don't know if company is the right word, but like OpenSim, where they already have a lot of mechanisms for sharing that information. They have their forums, they have their well-established website set up that allows you to add to it. I think having those repositories already be set up and run by a larger, at least a larger overseeing institution that's supported by federal funding allows for more broad dissemination of that work, which I think is great.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
so being able to connect with kind of the people who've already paved the way and further leveraging their resources and helping them expand their network as well.
Makes sense. Next, I think what we wanted to talk about a little bit is because you are now in the department of kinesiology, and before you were in the engineering department, you did your undergrad in the biomedical engineering, I believe, and then you came to our department, the mechanical engineering department. I was
Yeah.
wondering if there was any difference in how research as well as teaching is kind of approached in the engineering context versus how it's approached now, and if you have had to, kind of reorient or realign some of the ways you approach research as well as teaching in these two kind of disciplines.
That's a great question. I don't think I would have initially seen myself in a kinesiology department, mostly because I don't think I really knew what it was. I'd come through biomechanics like from the engineering perspective. And now I love it. I love being in the kinesiology department. I think as far as running a research lab, I would say my lab's going to do what my lab's going to do, and how I run it and the questions that I ask are not influenced, or I didn't need to change my approach for applying or being in a kinesiology department versus being in an engineering department. What I will say, sort of about the faculty search process, is I didn't change my research statement, you know, based off of who I was applying to. The research that I wanted to do is going to be the same, whether I'm in an engineering department or a kinesiology department or a biomechanics department or a physiology department. And I figured if I'm the right fit for them, they will want me, but I don't want to change who I am to fit this department. So that from a research side, I don't think it's been, my research directions have not been changed in a way that I would say I've had to like fit a mold or something. If anything, kinesiology has helped me think differently, including the aspects of physiology, physical activity. I think the neuroscience piece I already was kind of interested in, but I like the broader look at the whole person from a kinesiology perspective. There are challenges, and I think for me, they come more on the teaching side. Um, my students just have a different background than the students that I TA'd as a postdoc and a graduate student in engineering departments. They don't have the same math background, or at least they haven't been asked to apply it in the same way. However, they're much stronger in their physiology background than engineers. So it's just more about having to emphasize different topics and spend more time on different topics in class than maybe I would if I were in a different department. I think the other aspect is not as many kinesiology students have a background in coding. So providing resources that help students get up to speed. However, I think with this next generation, coding is something that a lot of people are getting an interest in. And I think that as this next generation comes up, we will probably see a shift in more students, probably from many, many disciplines, coming in with that coding background and interest. So, yeah, I think there are differences, certainly, but I think if anything, it's benefited me either from making me think in a different way, and certainly when you have to teach something, you learn it best. And so, teaching biomechanics or teaching muscle mechanics and modeling, and figuring out how to explain it, to someone who's coming in with very little knowledge has forced me to learn it better than I've ever known it before.
That makes sense.
I was curious if you could talk about the different classes that you teach or have taught previously at UMass, and if, as a new faculty member, if you were expected to develop a new elective class, probably related to biomechanics.
Yes, so the first course that I started teaching at UMass was their undergraduate biomechanics course. That's taught every semester. It's a 400 level, so typically taken by juniors or seniors. And I switch off with a more senior faculty member teaching it fall or spring. And so that was sort of basically handed to me. I've made some changes to it with time. I think I'm teaching it for the fourth time now, which is fun. It's, I'm very familiar with how it works, so I'm able to add and kind of change things to try and benefit the students as much as possible, versus feeling like I'm just hanging on. So that's great. Once you've taught a class a few times, you get to start to play with it a little bit more. I have, I will say, revived a graduate course that had not been taught for about 5 years when I first taught it. I sort of had noticed a gap in our graduate curriculum around muscle mechanics, kind of force length, force velocity curve type of stuff, and at least being taught from the biomechanics perspective. And so I revived a course that had been taught by one of our retired professors from our department. That was great because I still wasn't having to start completely from a blank slate. I was able to use lectures and assignments that had been previously used. I updated them. I added something that required a project that used OpenSim, which was fun for me. And I thought was a really nice culmination of all the topics that we discussed in that course. And so that was fun. And I've taught that twice now. So I feel like, again, like I'm getting a good handle on it, and being able to make changes to make it help the students get the most out of it and make it most enjoyable for them. Currently, I am teaching a OpenSim course. This is the first time I've taught this course. I've maybe helped TA'd for something similar, either at Ohio State or when I was at UT. But this is the first time I'm teaching in this format, and the first time I'm teaching it to, well, actually, there's 2 engineers in my course. So it's being offered in the kinesiology department, but there are 2. There's a mechanical engineering master's student and a biomedical engineering undergraduate student in the course. It's a small class, which is nice because we can be flexible. But yeah, trying to balance how much technical stuff I'm getting into versus like practical application of the software. But it's fun. I am just staying ahead of the students like by a day. But it's been fun to develop. It's fun using, again, the resources that OpenSim has. Scott Dell put out a book a couple years ago which talks about muscle-driven simulation. So that timing worked really well for me because I actually have a textbook to work from, which I know when Rob was developing these courses at Ohio State, there was no textbook. And so, yeah, it's been fun. It's a creative endeavor. And my philosophy is I am an active part of the learning process with the student. So as I'm developing and creating the course, I'm thinking about what's going to benefit them the most, what readings are most essential for them to know. And it's fun for me with OpenSim because I think I can think about all of the times that I've struggled learning this and what information do I wish I would have had kind of upfront about how to use this software. So it's very hands-on, practical application, but it's been fun to develop this course, and I'm excited for the opportunity to continue to teach it. So yeah, it's I feel lucky, but this is also what's, I guess, in some ways a very active choice that I wanted to teach at an R1 where my teaching requirements would be relatively low, but that I would get to really focus on those topics that I'm most passionate about. And so far, that's what I've been able to do, and I'm really grateful for that.
I have a quick follow-up. So, um, still related to teaching. I'm not sure if this is still present in a kinesiology department, but in engineering, there are not as many females as males in engineering. I don't know if that's still a thing in kinesiology departments or if it's more like 50-50. But I was just curious if you could talk about your experience with I guess establishing like credibility or like respect initially when you're like teaching for the first time or a newer instructor. Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I will say in kinesiology, it's a little bit more even than it is in engineering, or perhaps a lot. I don't know if it's quite 50-50, particularly at the tenure track level, but it's closer. It's not like I'm the only or one of two female faculty in the department. So that is nice. It's very nice. From the perspective, though, of like feeling like I'm being respected, having credibility in the department, from the students, I would say that I still face as a young female professor in both my undergraduate and my graduate classes. As far as trying to establish credibility, other than showing up and trying to feel prepared about what I'm talking about that day, I would say that, I mean, respect can be earned in a lot of ways. And I have tried to earn the respect of my students by showing them that I respect them. And respect myself. I set boundaries. I let them know the first day of class, these are my communication windows. If you can email me whenever you want, but this is when you can expect a response from me. I start the all of my courses with an introduction assignment to get to know the students, both like practically what are they hoping to get out of this course, but also like what are their goals, like what do they like to do, fun facts, stuff like that. And I also talk about mental health on the first day, and let them know that I'm a resource. So I try to show them that I see them as human. My undergraduate biomechanics course is probably one of the toughest courses in our department. And so from the idea of like, is this material serious or not? Like that kind of comes with the territory. The class is challenging because it applies math and physics principles that they haven't been asked to use. So, and they need it to graduate. So, I've just tried to show them that I care. I will be flexible with moving back deadlines if I feel like they could use some more time. I've offered opportunities to do midterm corrections that are relatively rigorous corrections that they're required to do. It's not just, oh, circle the right answer and you'll get the points back, but actually making it a part of the learning process. And from what I've seen, at least on the we call them SRTs at SRTIs at UMass, but our student course evaluations. The students appreciate it, at least the ones who respond. They will say the class is hard, but they learned something. They appreciated the fact that they could tell that I cared. So I think showing that I'm invested in them, we build a level of trust. And I think when, have I been taken advantage of? Have students tried to cheat in my class? Certainly. And there's different rules now on my syllabus because of that. And that's frustrating. But it also happens to everyone, regardless of whether you are a young woman or an old man. Like, it's just unfortunately part of something that comes with the job. And um, it's something you have to kind of learn to balance of when to recognize that these are other human beings going through their own stuff outside of the classroom, and when you have to kind of put your foot down and say, these are the roles and I have to apply them equally to everyone. So it's been a learning process for sure. But overall, I'd say it's been enjoyable, and I think the few students who maybe don't like have that respect are not the ones that are really going to make or break my career. So
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And kind of going on the tangent that you kind of touched upon about mental health and work-life balance, about yourself as an instructor, as a young person in academia and STEM. I again, for all the listeners out there, Sarah also has a great blog website kind of thing, which she had written an article about, which I really found interesting, which was about natural intelligence, and which was quite personal. And you showed a lot, you shared a lot of your personal stories and your journey in that article. I was wondering if there's anything that you would like to highlight about your own mental health journey, the whole blogging process in ways that maybe just doing that reflection also is helping you. Uh, Anything you can share.
yeah, I'm happy to share. I wish I wrote in, like, I've contributed more to that blog than I have. It's been, I think, over a year now since I like last published something there. But it's the hard part is I feel like if I'm writing, I should be like writing a manuscript or writing a grant or something. So I haven't taken the time to sit down, and I do try to put a lot of thought and reflection into those pieces that I put out. Um, but so most of the ones that I've put out were written like over breaks. um, but I think from the natural intelligence piece that you highlighted, I think a lot of that comes from um, being afraid that like you're not enough, which I think relates to the imposter syndrome that people talk about. Um, and for, at some point along the way, forgetting our worth because we're comparing ourselves to other people. I know that working for Dr. Siston and for Dr. Neptune, these are like two very well established people in the field, and if I am sitting there comparing my dissertation or postdoctoral work to like their R01 work, I'm gonna feel a little disappointed, and kind of question myself and forget about all of the challenges that they've had to overcome to get to those points. And so, I think being able to, yeah, trust yourself, and know that there's an inner wisdom inside, I'd say, each person, um, and not to sacrifice that for someone else or what you think somebody else wants from you. And so, yeah, I would like to put more out there as far as my own mental health journey. I'd say it started really probably at about 18 when I sort of became aware that maybe my mental health wasn't as good as it could be. And I had some challenges. It took me a while to seek help. And so that I think is why I'm such a big advocate in my class is for students to seek help, whether it's just by talking to me or by going to see like the counseling services on campus. because I wasn't initially given like the encouragement to go do that for myself. And I've seen so many benefits from it on the other side. And it takes time out of your day. But it's, I think, a benefit for the long run. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had a mix at Ohio State, I have to say. Their counseling and consultation services there is amazing. I've worked with different providers, both as an undergraduate student and as a graduate student. I was part of one of their graduate groups, which I would have never done. Like, can't tell you how many times I think my counselor was like, you should check out one of these like group sessions. And I was like, no, that's not for me. And then I went and it was amazing. And so I think, we're so afraid to say that we need help. Like, we live in such a culture that glorifies independence, but the realities is that we're interdependent, and that having community and having support is necessary, especially in what can be the very like grueling world of academia. And so, I have tried to be open about that journey so that other people feel comfortable being open about theirs, and to reduce the stigma, because so many people are dealing with it and people are just afraid to talk about it. And that's not helping anyone. It's not helping them. I think a lot of mental illnesses thrive because people are afraid to talk about their struggles with them. And so we bottle it all up, and makes it harder to deal with versus when we can talk about it out in the open and kind of separate ourselves from it and realize that we're more than whatever it is that we're struggling with. And so writing is certainly a method that helps me do that, helps separate like who I am as an individual from whatever it is I'm struggling with, and be able to say this is part of who I am, but it doesn't define me, and yet does impact me, and being honest about that. And so, I hope that being open about it will help other people be open and, willing to talk about it, because I think we all benefit when we share our stories.
No, 100%, and I'm really glad that you shared that, and I'm sure that you will be helping a lot of the listeners who are grad students themselves right now, who maybe are looking up to you, seeing that you have a great career, you're a professor there, and knowing that you have also gone through that journey would just make it a little more normal. And even Mega and the department is kind of, so a shout out here is trying to get some of the mental health seminars or workshops kind of hosted in the department itself. So any grad student, again, as Sarah kind of mentioned, if you're interested, please look out for one of those emails in the future. Email us.
So I have a question about mental health, but also just general work-life balance. And could you talk more about how you emphasize the importance of mental health, but also work-life balance, for your students?
That's a great question. So I think being in a kinesiology department actually helps this, because, we emphasize all the time the importance of being physically active, which I think is one of the best ways to promote your mental health. And so it's very acceptable to see people going out for a run or working out, at any time of day. That might be in the middle of the workday. And so, or even just, it might not be a workout. It might be just getting up and going for a walk or doing a walking meeting, in just like a 15-minute break. And so I think, promoting that kind of culture more kind of broadly, but it's not just about the physical aspect. What I do in my classes, and it's done slightly differently in my undergraduate versus my graduate classes based on the size and ability, but in both classes, or both groups of classes, I start my course each lecture period, with a question of how are you doing? So in my undergraduate course, we use an iClicker system. Basically, they can enter A, B, C, D, or E. So I have little emojis associated with each of those letters. And so I can quickly get a read on like is it midterm time and everyone is just like beat, or are people doing reasonably well? And then that gives me an idea of kind of what to expect or my students' needs are going to be that day. In my graduate classes, since it's smaller, I do a 2-word check-in, which is an idea I got from Brene Brown, and that's how she starts her meetings in her business, with a 2-word check-in. And that really acknowledges that we can be feeling more than one thing at the same time. We can be excited and tired. We can be grateful and nervous. And so I again, that gives me an opportunity to like figure out the pulse of the classroom, where are my students at. But I think it's also important that we take a time like to like check in with ourselves regularly. A tool that my counselor recently gave me was like a app that's a mindfulness bell. So you can set it to like go off at like regular intervals to like just kind of like check in and be like, how am I doing? Because sometimes I find it easier to like start and end my day kind of more mindfully. But then you get involved in a busy day, you're running from classes to meetings to across campus to, talk to this person, and all of a sudden, like, it's the end of the day and you feel depleted, and we haven't like checked in with ourselves throughout the day to see like, what do I need in this moment? And I actually think that goes back to that natural intelligence point of like listening to yourself and what you need. But if we never check in, we're not going to know. And so I try to, at least, if nothing else, those couple of times a week that my students see me, they'll get that one moment in the middle of their day to check in with themselves and kind of think about, how am I doing? What am I feeling right now? And what does that maybe mean that I need to do for myself? So I find it helpful for me, um, from both like a personal perspective, but also like as a teacher at the same time.
Got it. That that makes a lot of sense. And kind of going on one thing that you highlighted, that being in the department, in the kinesiology department, a lot of people are maybe thinking about movement and a little more aware perhaps than engineers who are just sitting in their labs. I was wondering, you kind of mentioned that your research is kind of even focusing on how nervous system adapts to different challenging gaits and movements. And I was wondering if your just being a researcher in that space and thinking about movement as well as the nervous system and neurology. Uh, is there any insight that you have gained from that, or has that changed your approach to physical fitness, mental health, the relation between both of them? Uh, yeah, anything speculative as well is okay.
I I have not gotten a chance to research that myself. I think I wonder about it often. And I think there is something there. Um, I can't remember the name of the book, but I can look it up after so you could like put it in the show notes for your listeners. But the International Women in Biomechanics group has a book club, and one of the first books we read was related to this idea of movement and mental health. And I am 100% sure that it was written by a psychologist at Stanford. And I just can't remember the name of the book or the author's name right now. Um, so I know that there are people out there doing that work. I don't know if they're doing it from like a biomechanics perspective, but I'm sure that there are people out there, like, do people walk differently when they're happy and they're sad? Um, and certainly, work I know is being done to look at how physical activity might benefit mental health. And I think for me, I know personally those things are very tied together. Um, as Katie mentioned prior to, I think, when we started recording, I had a knee injury in January and I have a torn ACL. And so I can't do the things I normally do. And it's been hard, but it's also made me want to appreciate how amazing our bodies are and what they can do. And I'm very grateful for the physical therapists out there that I either am currently training, who will be future physical therapists, or those who will be helping me get back and being able to be physically active again. But there's also other ways, like there's so many ways to be physically active. Like maybe I can't go run outside, but I can go take a walk, which I'm grateful to be able to do. So finding different ways to be physically active. And I've found that even little things like that, just taking a walk for 15 minutes and getting up out of my desk chair can be really helpful and really boost my mood. Yeah.
Okay. So this is related. Could you talk about how you balance work and home life, especially as a younger faculty member starting up a new lab and establishing your research lab by publishing papers and writing grants, but also as a new mom?
I'm doing it. I don't know if I'm doing it well. So yeah, so I think a benefit of this post-pandemic world, and I'm blessed to be in a very understanding department. I live an hour from Amherst, and so just trying to like balance commuting versus actually having like being able to work. So I'm on campus 3 days a week and I work from home 2 days a week, which has been very helpful. I can do Zoom meetings as needed. But so I have a pretty strict like schedule that I stick to, especially when I'm on campus. Like I work 8 to 4, so I can leave at 4 and be home by 5 to take on childcare. In the evenings, on the days I work from home, we are fortunate enough to have a nanny here, and so she is able to take care of my daughter while I'm working from home. And so I kind of work more of like a 9 to 5 on those days. So I can spend a little bit more time with my daughter in the morning before I start my work day. Um, in the evenings, she goes to bed at 8 now, and man, after 8 o'clock, it is hard. Like there's some things I can do after 8 o'clock, but like I'm not someone who works super well in the evenings, especially not at like deep thinking tasks like writing a grant. So learning to shift those tasks to the morning when I know I work better at them, and doing things like I can sit on the couch and prep for class and make slides or work on making an assignment or grade in the evenings. So it's become a act of learning when do I do different tasks best. And then also accepting that I have a limited amount of energy and strength, and there's no point in getting burnt out because I want to enjoy everything that I'm doing, and I love everything that I do. I love teaching. I love my research. I love working with my department. I also love being a mom and a wife, and I love having time for myself to physically exercise and take care of my mental health too. Not all of those things can always happen every day. Um, and certainly not to the extent that they could happen before I was a mom, where I could be in the gym for 2.5 hours before I'd start my work day as a postdoc. I don't get to do that anymore, but I can fit in 30 minutes on the treadmill now. And so it's just learning to adapt those expectations. I would say having a really supportive partner also helps. My husband works a very high demand job in sales. Um, and he is also supportive of understanding when I have a deadline coming up that I'm going to need more help, like taking care of our daughter in the evening. But I also understand when he has to travel for work. Um, so it's a give and take there, and we don't always get it right. So I think giving yourself grace in those moments. Um, and it's hard because, like, you know, at every stage, it feels like I'm just trying to get to the next thing. As a graduate student, you're trying to get your degree and then get the postdoc or whatever the next job is. And once you're a postdoc and you're like, okay, am I ever going to, like, am I good enough to be a faculty member? Well, now I'm a faculty member. Am I good enough to get tenure? And I got to a point where I'm like, I can't anymore. Like, I'm either good enough or I'm not. Um, and all I can do is like pour the love I have for what I do into my everyday, and if it's going to be good enough, it'll be good enough in the end. And if it's not, I don't want to kill myself to be good enough like that. Like I'm not going to be a whole person on the other end of tenure, if that's what it's going to take. And so there's a lot of self-acceptance and like acceptance that's involved in getting to that point of saying, this is what I'm willing to do and this is what I'm not willing to do. And identify what are my priorities and what are my boundaries. Like I said, I set my communication windows with my students, so I set that expectation with them. And I think identifying the right priorities is hard and something I'm still working on, especially with the balance of teaching and research. Sometimes it's easier to do the teaching stuff because it's a very specific task of like, I need to prep these slides. I need to grade this assignment. And it's so immediate, whereas like research kind of like it's this amorphous thing that just takes up a lot of time. And I have realized kind of now that I've started to get kind of things in place for my teaching, to be able to set more time away for research. Like I probably prioritize my teaching more in some instances than my research. And I'm trying to shift that now, to kind of get the research wheels moving. And it's hard. It's hard to try and do it all. And at the end of the day, you're doing the best you can. Having great mentors, having a great support system are really important to being able to kind of keep going. And I have to say, like reaching out to, I have great mentors in my department. And then I realized that like I didn't have someone quite exactly like me in my department still, even though there are a lot of women, a lot of people with children. And so I got connected with someone else outside of the department, but still at my university, who I have a lot of common with. And I can see like she did it, like she's making it. She's ahead of me in her career and she's doing it. And so like I can see that it's possible, but she can also like commiserate with the challenges and provide both like support and guidance as well. And so I think having a wide and a lot of different people to reach out to for different things helps with trying to figure out how to balance it and how to do it. And it's something else I've been open about. And I've found the more open I am about like how hard it is, the more people are like, oh yeah, it's hard for me too. And you realize no one's doing it all.
That absolutely makes sense. And I think just doing this podcast and speaking to a lot of the other faculty members also, I've kind of seen that similar sentiment. So that definitely resonates. I also want to be respectful of your time, and I see that we're kind of coming closer to our 1 hour mark. So I'll probably start off with our final question that I usually ask all of our guests, which is what kind of advice would you have for our current grad students who are, let's say, just starting off, versus somebody who is maybe in the middle of the program? This probably applies more to a PhD student than a master's. And then somebody who is like right there, about to graduate. Uh, any advice from your time as a grad student?
Yeah. For those earlier students, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Something that was told to me early as a faculty member was you don't get tenure in your first year. As a faculty member, it's true about your PhD too. You're not getting your dissertation in your first year. So, yeah. And something Rob told me, when I came to him real fired up, because I was like, this research isn't good enough. This isn't like, you know, I don't know what I thought I was going to get the Nobel Prize or something, but he was like, it's okay to hit a single. You don't, you know, just get on base. You don't have to hit the home run every time. And I think remembering that science is an incremental process. We're building on one another. We're hitting singles or somebody else's single allows us to get to the next base. And so being patient with yourself, and remembering that it's a long process and to enjoy the journey. I think throughout your graduate experience, finding people you can connect with. I don't know what that's going to look like for everyone. I have amazing friends from my time as a graduate student at Ohio State. I think Dr. Elena Crothers was on here. You know, she and I have a group of, there's 6 of us. and we're still really close. We would work out together, so we would get that physical activity in together for our mental health. And then we would have dinners and wine nights together too on Wednesday evenings, and that was something for us to look forward to and support each other on our journey. So again, we kind of make it in this culture like we're independent and we can do it on our own, and that's not true. We need each other and in different ways. So don't be afraid to lean on um, the people around you and support the people around you. Um, for those who are later, kind of getting closer to graduation, um, I would say take some time to really reflect about what you want next, and then don't sell yourself short when you're going for it. Um, the biggest thing for me when I was applying for my faculty jobs was I'm going to show up as authentic as I can possibly be. And if that is what they want, then they will accept, they will, offer me a position. And if it's not, then I don't want to be there because I don't want to have to be somebody I'm not for an entire career. So just going and like presenting your most authentic self. And I think kind of that energy that we put out will receive, and you'll find that place is the right fit, like I found at UMass.
That that absolutely makes sense, and I think again also resonates a lot with some of the advice that some of the previous guests have said. Especially when you're closer to graduation, everyone is like, "Yeah, please reflect." We often miss out on that reflection part. So,
Yeah.
great to hear that from you as well. Is there anything else that before we kind of just wrap up? Is there anything else that you would like to share that maybe me or Katie didn't get an opportunity to ask you about?
Well, I think we did definitely cover a lot of ground, which is wonderful. Um, I'm always happy to talk to students as they're planning their next step, whether that's undergraduates thinking about graduate school, if that's current graduate students trying to figure out what to do next, or people about to start kind of that faculty search process. So hopefully it's come across here. Like I'm a pretty open book about my experiences, personal and professional. And I'm happy to be a resource for students as they try and navigate this crazy world of academia.
Sounds great. And thank you very much for making time for this and even making yourself available. I'll go ahead and, as we discussed earlier, I'll put down the links to your bio from your university page, as well as your Twitter handle and your LinkedIn page. And so any grad students listening can hopefully connect with Sarah over there. And that's thank you again. Thank you very much for making time for this, Sarah. I hope we definitely had fun, and we tried to cover as much as we could in that 1 hour. Um,
Thank you so
and
much for having me. This has been wonderful. Really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
thank you. And for all the listeners, just the usual outro that we have all of our social media handles in our YouTube description page. So please follow us on our LinkedIn page, Instagram page. If you're an alum from the department, or if you're a current grad student or an undergrad student, feel free to join our alumni group. We'll be posting short form clips of this podcast on our Insta page or LinkedIn page. So if you would like to watch shorter clips, that's where you want to go. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah, once again.